Hello, this is Sophie, your host of Breaking the Mould. In this episode, we dive into the world of charity partnerships and food waste with Charlotte Hill, the inspiring CEO of the Felix Project. The Felix Project rescues surplus food and distributes it to those in need, providing millions of meals in London every year. The charity has fast become a go-to partner for businesses looking to make a real difference and fulfil their ESG goals. As Charlotte says, once you partner with the Felix Project, it's very difficult to stop. Together, we talk about what successful partnerships look like for businesses and for charities, how they can enhance your brand, boost employee engagement, and much, much more. Let's get started. Hi, Charlotte. Welcome to Breaking the Mould.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're delighted to have you and to hear everything about you and the Felix Project and the work that you're doing. But we're going to start with you, actually, and we'd really like you to tell us about your very impressive and extensive background in the non-profit sector and really kind of pick that apart and where you come from and what your approach is.
Of course. Oh, goodness. It's always big, like lead in when someone says very impressive. It's not very impressive. I love being a chief exec of a charity, and I always feel like it's a great privilege to get to do. And the fact this is my third charity chief exec job, all of which have been incredibly different, but incredibly rewarding, and I have learned a huge amount from, has been amazing. So as you said, I'm currently the chief executive of the Felix Project, and I've been here about 2.5 years now. And we rescue surplus food and distribute it to about 1,200 charities across London. Last year did about 32 million meals. This year on track to do about 36 million meals. So big old logistical operation of about 40 vehicles across London and 4 big warehouses and a kitchen and various things. So that's my current job, but I've done a couple of other charity chief exec jobs before then. But my background actually was in Whitehall, so I spent my 20s as a special advisor in Westminster, showing how long ago it was. It was under a Labour government, so a very long time ago now. Feels like a lifetime ago. And from there, I then ran policy and public affairs at the NSPCC, that was my first move across into the voluntary sector, which I loved, but again was a big old oil tanker of a charity, huge organisation when I was there. And I've worked overseas in the voluntary sector as well as here in the UK. So no, I'm a passionate volunteer myself, but also I love jobs where you can get stuff done. And even though I loved working in Whitehall, sometimes it's quite frustrating in terms of getting stuff done. Whereas running a charity, you can really make some amazing impact and get lots of things done, which is why I love it so much.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the differences were with those they're all quite big juggernauts really, and interesting that you've ended up in a grassroots organisation compared to where you started. What motivates you? You've touched on it a little bit there, but what really motivates you in the morning to get up and do the job?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because of course it's the impact that any organisation you work for has. And seeing the difference you're making in the world is hugely motivating. But actually, I think the thing that makes me get out of bed in the morning is the people. Whether it is volunteers or colleagues, at Felix we had 15,000 volunteers last year. Wow. And we have 200 amazing colleagues who work at the Felix Project. And I think it's their kind of passion and commitment and dedication, but also their energy and enthusiasm and can-do attitude and innovation and ideas and all of those things that actually make the Felix Project the Felix Project. And as do our partners, actually, whether it's community organisations we distribute food to, or the food supply partners where we rescue the food from, or, you name it, actually. There's so many different bits of the ecosystem of London that we touch. It's that great community of people coming together, having a big, massive collective impact that is just really powerful. No one individual can make a massive difference on their own, but you bring all of those people and all of those energy and ideas together, and actually you're doing something really, really significant. And that for me is the really energizing part of what we do.
Your energy is palpable, and that's obviously helping you to be a leader of an organisation like the Felix Project, and it sounds like it kind of permeates through the whole organisation. You've just passed a huge milestone this week, which I believe was that you'd produced 3 million meals.
That's in our kitchen. Yeah. So
Just in your
Felix is,
kitchen.
yeah. So as I said, we did 32 million meals through food distribution last year. So that could be us, sourcing raw ingredients that we distribute to people that they cook. But alongside our kind of traditional redistribution, infrastructure through the warehouses and vans, we set up something called Felix's Kitchen about 3 years ago. And absolutely. The aspiration, the idea behind setting it up was that for people who don't have access to a kitchen, and at the time that was largely people who were homeless, giving them a bag of raw ingredients is of no value to them. Whereas if you cook a meal, then obviously they get all of the amazing. It's all cooked from surplus food, and it's incredible quality food. I always say that the people who work in Felix's Kitchen are magicians because they don't know what food they're going to be dealing with every day because it's all surplus, and they don't know what workforce they're going to have because they're largely working with volunteers. Yet they produce 5,000 meals every day of restaurant quality, delicious, nutritious, beautiful food. And yes, so we did our 3 millionth meal in the kitchen last week, which was a lovely milestone.
Yeah,
and even though we really try and say at Felix, it isn't about the number. I always say to people, look, it's as much about how we do it as what we do. The fact that that's 3 million meals that have gone to people who would have otherwise been struggling to eat and had an amazing, delicious, gorgeous, like cooked meal. Something I'm really, really proud of. And we've got an amazing team of people who've made that happen. So a lovely milestone for Felix's Kitchen.
Yeah, really good. And along with all the massive numbers that you've just mentioned as well. And I hear what you're saying about it not all being about the numbers, but they really articulate the huge amount of work that's happened with the project over the years. Just taking a little step back to the foundation and the origins of story, if you like, of the Felix Project. Could you talk us through that?
Of course. And I always very proudly have my Felix logo on. I'm wearing it in at least 2 items of clothing today, and I've got my Felix green nails.
Very on brand.
Very on brand. The reason why there is such a big heart, and we describe ourselves as a logistics company with a massive heart, is because of our origins. And I always say that we've got some Felix magic in everything we do because of the young man we were named after. So Felix Byam Shaw very sadly died 10 years ago. He was a passionate 14-year-old who was, a bundle of energy, everyone says, who knew him. And he was very passionate about food insecurity, particularly. So he was from a privileged background himself, but played football against boys who hadn't eaten and could not understand how we could be living in London, with so much, and there could be people who couldn't afford to eat. He very sadly went away on a school trip and died of meningitis very suddenly. And so his brilliant parents, Justin and Jane, who are still on my trustee board now, thought, what would be the impact that Felix would have wanted to have in the world had he lived? So rather than do something around meningitis, they decided to set up the Felix Project, which at the time was rescuing, just in West London, a very, very small kind of garage, rescuing surplus food from the local community and getting it out to charities.
Well, fantastic to have done that, and for his parents to still be so involved as well in the project. Thinking about those boys on that football pitch, could you expand a bit on who you're seeing benefit from your service now?
Of course. So actually, we've become part of the infrastructure for the voluntary sector in London. So if you're an organisation who, for whatever reason, need or use food for part of your service, so that might be a domestic violence shelter, it might be a homeless shelter, it might be a food bank, it might be a community kitchen, it might be, something for the elderly, a lunch club or something. We effectively try and rescue food that would otherwise go to waste and deliver it out to those organisations. And the idea being, we want them to be able to spend the money they would have spent on food on another sort of support worker that can support them to get out of whatever the challenges that they've come to. And usually the underlying, there is an underlying poverty cause, but that may have been caused by a disability or, as I say, homelessness, lots of different contributing factors. So we try and make sure that those services can provide even more of a wraparound support because they're not paying for their food. We have seen a real shift and change in the demographics of people needing our support. Increasingly in the cost of living crisis, it's been people who can't afford to turn their cookers on. It's more and more in-work Londoners, so our key workers, the cleaners in our hospitals or the teaching assistants in our schools, who once they've paid their increased mortgage or rent, once they've put those paid the energy bills that have also gone up, once they've put fuel in their car or paid to get to work, all of those costs have gone up. The only elastic part of their outgoings is their food. So actually, increasingly, we are seeing people having to skip meals because once they've paid all of those other costs, they just don't have enough money.
Yeah.
So there's been a real shift in the demographic, but there's also been a massive increase in demand. So as I said, we serve about 1,200 charities now, some of them once a week, some of them twice a week, some of them 5 days a week. We have about 675 on our waiting list who we can't currently service. So, and all of those we deliver to now would all like to take more food because they in turn have seen a big increase in the demand for their services. So it's a change in the demographic, but it's also a big increase in people who I think would never think they would be living in food insecurity, finding themselves over the last couple of years. They've come out of the pandemic, which caused lots of people to build up debt or have a lot of challenges, straight into this cost of living crisis where we're actually seeing the kind of depths of demand and of people struggling to be much greater than we found even in the pandemic.
Yeah, I guess there's something really powerfully connected there between the numbers you described at the beginning, and we talked about it not being all about the numbers, but that increase in your numbers is reflective of the increase in need from your beneficiaries in the society, so that they're kind of directly correlated, obviously, but that's a real trend. And do you see that slowing or changing?
Sadly not. No, actually, I think there is kind of the 25 to 30% of the population of London who are just as pretty consistently struggling now. And there's a big gap from them up to people for whom actually the cost of living crisis probably hasn't made a significant change. So we are seeing that kind of bottom 25 to 30% of people in terms of income are consistently struggling now. And we've seen the same with our colleagues. We deliver to a lot of Trussell Trust food banks. They've done an awful lot of looking at understanding the demand and the people who are coming and the need. And there is now a pretty consistent shift in more people living in food insecurity because of lots of underlying challenges. So it's sadly not something we're seeing improving or shifting. It's pretty tough times for lots and lots of people out there. But equally, we really want to make sure there are amazing grassroots community organisations doing incredible things in their communities to try and tackle and address and support people. And so the fact that we're able to effectively behave a little bit like a funder, so we, rather than funding people with money, we fund them with food. It's a relationship that we take very seriously and a responsibility we take very seriously. And we know the food is there to rescue. And so the big environmental part of what we do is also really important, which is we want to make sure if there's amazing food over here and there's people who need it over here, effectively I say that we're the bridge between the kind of supply and demand. So how can we make sure we bridge between those two things when we know the supply is there and we know the demand is there? The Felix Project's job is to link those two things up.
That's a really interesting analogy and not dissimilar to Action Funder, really, where we're talking about kind of people who have the funds to give and people who need to receive the funds. So that kind of matchmaking between, but you're doing it with food rather than with money. It's a very good analogy. It's an incredible organisation, and it's amazing how well you work and play with all the other grassroots organisations within that area. It's clearly extremely collaborative. And we'll come on to partnership working a bit later and how that works for you, both with other partners, but also with businesses and your funders as well. You've touched on growth and how important people are and kind of motivating those people about growing the project and kind of having a goal and working towards them. You came into the Felix Project and it's grown a lot, not just from yourself. I understand the people before you as well, but like you said, from a garage, a very small grassroots organisation, to a larger one, albeit kind of southeast focused, but with a lot of awareness around the country, even if your distribution is mostly in London. What do you think triggered that change? Was there a moment? You touched on maybe COVID, but was there something that really kind of triggered the growth for the organisation?
So as you say, I stand on the shoulders of giants. So great people before me when setting this organisation up built it with very, very entrepreneurial kind of spirit to it.
Right.
So I think it was always built with an idea of trying to build it with systems and processes and technology and structures that would enable growth. So definitely some of the kind of technology and systems and things we have meant that scaling from 1 depot to 2 depots to 3 depots to 4 to a kitchen to the green scheme, it was built on quite good foundations to enable it to do that.
Interesting.
Sadly, the fact is there is an awful lot of food to rescue, and there's an awful lot of community organisations who can do good with that food. So partly because of the density of population of London, partly because of the very deep and geographical focus of poverty in London. There is a huge amount of demand in London compared to any other part of the country. So the demand is there. There are incredible community organisations who need food to do what they do. That's the hook or the draw that brings people together. That means that then they get all of the other bits of support. So I think it's partly driven by demand. And as you say, our 8 years as the Felix Project, only a sort of 2 or 3 years into that, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And so this became a kind of emergency crisis response organisation.
Yeah.
And it was on that footing for a good couple of years. And then we've come out of that and we've come straight into a cost of living crisis, which, although a different sort of crisis, has still seen massive demand for our services as food inflation has been in double digits.
Yeah.
So
you're talking about basic needs in both of those,
exactly.
Aren't you? Yeah.
Very basic needs of people just not being able to, for whatever reason, get the food they need. So it's partly demand driven. It's partly also the fact, though, and I say this proudly, we're very good at what we do. So it's an organisation that people like to work with because we do what we say we're going to do. So, we've got great relationships with food supply partners because we try wherever possible to be as agile and nimble as we can.
Yeah. And
to go and collect in an incredibly reliable way at a time that suits them, and we try and take as much as we can and say no to very little. And that was one of the reasons we opened the kitchen as well, actually, was that huge scale catering packs or food that was on its very last day of life, actually we can deal with those in the kitchen, whereas we wouldn't necessarily be able to get them through a depot and get them out to community organisations, either in the form they're in or because of they're literally on their last day of life. Whereas if we cook them, that gives them another kind of 3 or 4 days life that then gives us time to get them out to people.
So an interesting pivot to what the organisation did at that time.
And we're actually opening in South London a processing unit at the end of this year, where we're going to be able to take seasonal gluts of produce and turn them into things that are usable, but also extend their life. So we're constantly trying to think of new ways that mean we can say yes to food, and then give them out in a format that works for our community organisations, because there's absolutely no point in giving them food that they can't use or isn't wanted by. So we try and make it culturally appropriate where possible, but also in a form that they can take. And so we're always trying to think of new ways of doing that. So there's lots and lots of it, like innovation and testing and trialing of new ideas that we do every single day to try and think of different ways we can rescue more food. Our vision is of a London where no good food is wasted and no one goes hungry.
This next question might relate to what you've just described there around innovation, but it might not. It might be something else. But what are you most proud of in your time at the Felix Project?
There's so many different things, but actually it's back to my earlier statement of not what we do, but how we do it. I think I'm most proud of the culture. I think I'm most proud of the kind of, ethos and way we do what we do. And I always say to my guys, there's 2 really important kind of shining lights at the top for me. One is we've got to keep people safe. You can imagine whether that's for health and safety or food hygiene or whatever. The other key thing is are people happy? And joy is a really big and important part of what we do. And so I would just say the thing I'm most proud of, this year we've had the most amazing staff survey results of people saying that they really love coming to work here.
Amazing.
And so that, I think, is the thing I'm most proud of. Is I want it to be a place of joy. And of course I want it to be a place where we have great impact and we do great things and we do innovation and new ideas and things. But actually the thing that makes people keep coming back and wanting to be part of that great community we've built is that it's also a place of joy.
Well, maybe those two things are really connected. So, you're going to have a greater impact if you love what you do, because like you mentioned earlier, you're so committed to the goal and to the mission of the organisation, that you can give it your all, which is a really
absolutely
nice place to be. That's a great thing to be proud of. As you know, at Action Funder, we connect businesses with non-profits that need support, whether that's through funding, mostly through funding or other means, because they can't get the support they need elsewhere quite often. Thinking about the Felix Project, that I know has a lot of corporate partnerships, how have businesses supported you as a project? And related to that, businesses often want to offer time as well as money. So how can a business support you and organisations like yours?
So business without corporate support in lots of different forms, the Felix Project would not be what it is today. So we always say that we want someone to be, if you're a food partner, you are genuinely a partner, which means that you give us food, you give us funding, you give us volunteer time from your workforce, and you give us kind of PR and communications and help us spread the message about what we do. And all of those things are equally important. Of course, we can't do what we do without the food, but actually those 15,000 volunteers I talked about last year, they are essential to us, but that's absolutely critical to us getting that food, from point A to point B. Whether they're driving our vans or helping us allocate food or picking food, or there's lots and lots of different ways cooking food. People come and volunteer their time at Felix. But genuinely, without those people, we can't do it. And lots of them are group volunteers who come from our corporate partners. Yeah. So we're very fortunate, for example, in our East London depot and Felix's kitchen, it's a walking distance from Canary Wharf. So lots and lots and lots of our, particularly our kind of funding partners who are based in Canary Wharf, send so many of their volunteers across to us. So I'm smiling, it's Global Volunteering Month at Morgan Stanley in June. So this month we've had... I think I was chatting to the guys from Morgan Stanley when they're in there. I think we've had 1,600 Morgan Stanley kind of volunteer shifts filled in the month of June, which is incredible, like absolutely amazing. So totally and utterly, those, the funding, of course, is important from our corporate partners, and the food is absolutely essential. But the volunteer time they give us as well is so, so important, as is spreading the word, actually. We really want to become London's best loved charity, and we're not going to do that unless people know about us. So the way that, lots of our business partners help us also spread the word about what we do is also critical.
Yeah, the communications is really key all round, probably.
Yeah.
What's the mutual benefit to both sides, to the non-profits and to the corporate partners?
So our corporate partners, first of all, depending on what it is they're giving to us, we've got pretty good reporting mechanisms. So if they're giving us food, we're able to give them really good impact reporting, both environmentally and socially, about the impact it's having by their food not going to waste. So we can tell them where that food has gone and how many individuals it's helping to support and what those different community organisations do. So the kind of different people who are eating the food. We can also massively help them with their own retention of staff. So we get loads of feedback from our corporate partners that one of the things they love is the partnership with the Felix Project, and they love coming as a team and volunteering in a depot or in the kitchen or on the green scheme. And actually they feel really, really proud about the association between their business and the Felix Project. So I think it really helps with kind of attracting different sorts of talent into their organisations, because people these days want to feel proud of where they work, and they care about the moral makeup of the business as well, and they love the kind of team building lovely feeling like I described. When you as a team come and help us do 4,000 meals in your shift that are going to feed 4,000 people that evening, it's massively motivating, but it's also really, really great team building and bonding and doing something together as a collective that's really powerful.
Yeah. And just thinking about what you said about the foundations, you said that the project had been set up with really good foundations. Is kind of understanding the reporting requirements for corporate organisations or for yourselves integral to that? Because obviously, a lot of what you said there was about data and about showing the impact that those events have. So was that kind of built in up front?
And we're always trying to get better at it. I always say we never rest on our laurels. We always want to have continuous improvement about how we can get better. So we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think what we are good at is providing that sort of data to our partners, but also really building the relationships. And I think one of the things that makes the Felix Project very sticky, and I always use this phrase with my colleagues, is that it's very difficult for businesses, whether they're funding partners or food supply partners or whatever sort of partners they are, to leave partnering with the Felix Project because so many people in their business have come and volunteered. And so we have so many different touch points throughout their businesses of people who have come and volunteered and feel really connected to us. But also we're really good at it. Like, I think we're really good at building and maintaining relationships with organizations because, like you say, it's like the DNA of what we do. We're a very collaborative organization that realizes we can't do what we do without those partners.
It's interesting what you said about those partnerships and around communications and that being a really key thing and a benefit on both sides, really. So the corporate partners have something to talk about and you do as well. I think there's something you've done really well, which is your partners love to shout about the work that they do with you. Your branding is bright, it's powerful, it's instantly recognizable if you're in London.
Yeah.
What do you think the secret of your success is there? Because a lot of organizations will work with a partner but won't necessarily get that amplification of the work that's happening on both sides.
Yeah,
I think you could think of.
Yeah, I think we're really explicit about it. I always think with anything, right, I think if you ask people, they will generally help you if they can. And if we say to our partners, look, one of the ways you can help us is by helping spread the word about what we do. That's like it's cost-free ask of saying, look, a massive way you can help us is to tell other people about what we do and how much you've enjoyed being involved and what a benefit you've had out of it. That's great if it means that we might be able to find some other partners and some other volunteers and some other food or some other funding. It's such a powerful way that people can help us. So and I also do think, though, there is something around, we've got some very great visible assets like our vans driving all over London and things that mean what we do is quite a visible thing. And we're connecting into lots of different community organisations and those sorts of things. So
yes, you're widespread.
But I also just think, just ask, when people say, goodness, how do you get people to talk about it? I'm like, well, we tell them that it's a really important part of being one of our partners is to tell other people about your positive experience at the Felix Project. Yeah, quite a simple one, but one that maybe people in the smaller grassroots organisations might not be comfortable to have that ask. But it's definitely something we encourage on the Action Funder platform as well, with updates and making sure you reach out to your funder and vice versa. Yeah.
Bit of a tricky question now. Naming no names, but what is your worst corporate experience that you've had to deal with? Partnership experience, I should say, maybe.
Yeah, I think to be honest, if I think back, so the two organisations I ran before the Felix Project were both youth sector organisations. So UK Youth was a big national youth work charity, and Step Up to Serve and the I Will campaign was all around getting young people volunteering. I think the trickiest thing always for me in those situations would be when a corporate would let young people down. So, if at the very last minute a group pull out of a volunteering day, because there's been some sort of big crisis or some sort of big things happened at work, and I think people don't always realise the impact of pulling out of a day has on a charity. And so particularly if there were young people involved and they had planned something or were looking forward to meeting people or doing something, and then that gets pulled. But similarly at the Felix Project, one of the trickiest things now is if at the last minute a corporate group pull out of a volunteering day for us, we either have to pay for agency staff to cover that shift, or my colleagues have to basically probably work double shifts to cover the because we're not making up nice to haves for our group and corporate volunteers to do. They're doing really essential work that means that the food is going from here to here, and that food still has to get there at the end of that day, even if that group doesn't turn up. So I always think those are the things where I think sometimes groups and corporate volunteers or for whatever reason when they don't turn up, they don't realise the impact it has.
Yeah, so it's a real world impact when corporates don't follow through. A bit nicer now. What's the best one that you've had? What's the best partnership? And you might have many, but maybe what's the themes?
We've got loads of amazing partnerships, but I think where the best ones are is when you get really embedded across lots of different functions of a business. So I'll give you a really good example of Amazon. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a massive and amazing partnership with Amazon, and we obviously work with Amazon Fresh on rescuing all of the food we can from Amazon Fresh, but we also work with Amazon Logistics. So they give us, when they've got spare drivers and vans, they give us extra logistics capacity to help us
Mm-hmm.
move food around London. We get amazing volunteers from all across the different bits of the Amazon business who come and volunteer. They helped us. So we've got a farm down in Kent where we rescue like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tons of apples and plums and pears over a kind of a 4-week period. And
Mm-hmm.
Amazon basically drive all of the fruit back into London for us free of charge every
Wow.
day. Like it's so multifaceted and there's so many different elements to it. But there's a really good fit in that effectively
Yeah.
we are a logistics company and they are a logistics company.
Mm.
And they also use technology and they also have food and so
Yeah.
actually there's so many different touch points across the business that massively benefit them partnering with us, but also massively benefit the
Mm.
Felix Project.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like we've built loads of really deep, meaningful, lovely relationships across. So last week, actually, we had about 50 senior leaders from Amazon Fresh who came and took over one part of our depot, and they did their like management away day there, and then they did a shift volunteering in the afternoon. And I knew loads of them, like because
Mm.
actually they're quite an embedded part of what we do.
Yeah.
And similarly with Morgan Stanley, who I mentioned earlier, I know so many of the Morgan Stanley colleagues because we've just extended. We've had a 2-year partnership with Morgan Stanley. We've actually now extended it for another 5 years
Mm.
because
Wow.
so many of the Morgan Stanley colleagues love coming and volunteering in our
Mm-hmm.
depot and kitchen. And again, I love it now. I know so many of those faces from Morgan Stanley who come, and they first of all would have come as a group and volunteered, but
Mm.
actually they come back as individuals on the weekend because they love it so
Yeah.
much. And and it's great because Morgan Stanley also give us an amazing level of funding as well as the volunteer time, as well as they give us loads of like pro bono capacity to help us do
Mm-hmm.
big strategic challenges and so
Yeah.
for me it's these like multi touch point partnerships but that go over many many years.
Yeah, I was going to say the long termness seems to be really important, and the synergy with what you're doing.
It absolutely is. And yeah, being, what I always like to think that we match people like toe to toe for professionalism. So
Mm.
we try and make sure we are run as efficiently and effectively and professionally as we possibly can, so that
Mm.
when we're working with any of these businesses, actually, I'd like to think that we respond, as they would expect a business partner to.
You match them.
We
Yeah.
do. We really, really try to within the realms of the possible.
Mm.
So yeah, we really try to. But yeah, it's the long-term embedded partnerships where,
Mm.
and also where we're really honest about what we can and can't do.
Yeah.
And I also feel really comfortable because I've known a lot of the people in those organisations for years now,
Mm.
asking for help when we're struggling or when something's not gone right or whatever,
Mm.
genuinely treating them as a genuine partner and
Yeah.
asking for help.
Yeah. Great. And I think you said that earlier around the communications as well, like being bold enough to say this is what we need, and then being able to respond to that, which I guess as with any relationship, communication and trust is key. It sounds like it's exactly the same here.
I think like really building relationships, actual human contact. Like I always say to my guys, just pick up the phone. Don't send an
Mm.
email. Don't be a faceless person at the end of a keyboard. Like
Yeah.
pick up a phone and make a relationship with people. And I think that is one of the big benefits we have as the Felix Project, because what we do is so tangible, because people physically come out and spend time with us. Whether you're out in a van with someone or sitting alongside them on a packing line or whatever it is, you get
Mm.
like a good few hours. Like back in the olden days, you'd go and play a round of golf with someone to get that sort of time to kind of
Right.
like get engagement with them.
Yeah.
Get them volunteering at Felix, and you can't help but form a relationship with someone when you get a proper chunk of time doing something quite physical alongside them.
Hmm.
So I think it's like the modern day
Yeah.
golf of how you
Wonderful.
build corporate relationships.
Fantastic.
Come and help us feed people instead of paying lots of money to play golf.
What a fantastic call to action. I was going to ask you before we wrap up, what are the kind of tangible tips, but you've kind of covered that off in
Mhm.
there, like the 3 do's and don'ts. And I just think that's such a nice way of wrapping that up. We're all about action at Action Funder. What's the one action that our business audience can take away to start creating positive impact?
Come and find us at the Felix Project and get involved. Honestly, there is a role that everybody can play at Felix, whatever your business is, whatever you do. There's a way you can help us move towards a London where no good food is wasted and no Londoner goes hungry. And there's so many different ways people can get involved. So if you don't know about us, come and find out. And there will be a way you can help.
And if they're not in London?
Then we're a proud part of the Fair Share network. So if you're outside of London, there's people rescuing and redistributing food in lots of different ways all over the country. So if you're in a different part of the country and you can't come and help us at Felix, check out the Fair Share website and find out who in that network is doing something similar in your area.
Perfect. Charlotte, thank you so much for another really good chat. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. And thanks so much for taking the time to be on the Action Funder podcast and breaking the mould. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Breaking the Mould. Join us next month when we feature another brilliant voice from the world of positive impact. You can subscribe to Action Funder on your podcast player to be notified when that episode drops. In the meantime, visit actionfunder.org to find more inspiring leaders driving change in our community. Whilst you're there, make the most of the tools to find grassroots non-profits and learn how you can make an impact on people, planet and profit. Finally, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate our show. This will help more people discover the show and get inspired.